So often in popular media, we see brains in jars being depicted as a way to defeat death and allow an individual's consciousness to live far into the future. We've seen it in games and shows like Teen Titans, Ghost in the Shell, Fallout, and so many more. However, typically, when we see these brains being re-implanted into a body, it's a mechanical body so that the individual's consciousness can live past any biological constraints. However, something that's rarely addressed is what would happen if a brain with absolutely no sensory input or stimulation of any kind was simply stored in a vat of nutrients that was able to keep it alive for a prolonged period of time. And then this brain was reimplanted successfully into a functioning biological body. Well, this is what Psychonauts attempts to address through the mind of Helmut Fulbear, the member of the Psychic Six who lost his own body during the Battle of Grulovia. In the first half of the game, after Raz enters Otto's lab and learns all about the brain frame, he proceeds to withdraw a brain, almost like it was a gumball machine, and decides to pay this disembodied mind a little bit of a visit. And so once he's actually inside the mind of this unknown brain, he's greeted with pure darkness, only broken by a singular mote of light that sounds remarkably similar to Jack Black. And so after realizing that this small mote of light is suffering from some severe sensory deprivation, which Raz believes is what resulted in this pure representation of an individual's consciousness losing all of its memories, even forgetting his own identity, Raz quickly comes up with the idea that he should re-implant this mind into the body of Nick from the mailroom so that the brain can begin regaining its memory, Nick's body can be inhabited once again and won't be a danger to itself, and so that he can get to the crawler that's working in the mailroom. Essentially, everyone wins from this arrangement. Now, if you're watching this video, you know that this brain has had no sensory input at all for the last 20 years since the Battle of Grulovia, and so the moment we see it get re-implanted into Nick's body, we begin to see him experiencing what can only be explained as synesthesia, which is explained exceedingly well in Mr. Donlin's video on this very level, and that focuses more on an individual's sensation and perception. So after you finish this video, make sure you check out his too, because it's really great if you haven't already. But for the sake of context, synesthesia is defined by the American Psychological Association as being a condition in which stimulation of one sense generates a simultaneous sensation in another. So, with his brain once again being exposed to the world around him, we see Helmut begin associating stimuli of one sense with another. And in turn, this causes him to experience complete and utter sensory overload, being overwhelmed by all five senses for the first time in 20 years. Essentially, with his brain being re-implanted so abruptly, Helmut is brought to a state that his senses are so overwhelmed with stimuli that he is unable to process or respond to all of them appropriately because he was actively thrown in the deep end with these sensory inputs. And if we use clairvoyance on him, we can see that even the saturation of all the colors in the world are cranked to a dizzying degree, and Raz is nothing but a blur of color moving through the room. And so, with things not having gone quite to plan for Raz, he re-enters Helmut's mind to see what's going on. But when Raz gets there, he sees the absolute chaos that was brought on by reintroducing this sensory-deprived brain to a living body. Which, with this sensory overload being at such an extreme, this prompts a panic attack, which, while it's described by the game as coming out of nowhere, I think we can pretty easily attribute it to Helmut's extreme sensory overload. Now, I think that we need to talk about how these fights against panic attacks are structured incredibly interestingly, because between the Mote of Light's dialogue while fighting against these enemies and their physical appearance, we can see several of the pieces of diagnostic criteria required by the DSM-5 to truly determine whether or not something can be characterized as a panic attack or not, with the manual saying that it has to be an abrupt surge of intense fear or intense discomfort that reaches a peak within minutes, and during which time 4 or more symptoms occur. And so, just taking into account the appearance of the panic attack itself, we can potentially infer a fear of death, as the panic attack's face is quite literally a skull. Now, to be fair, this may not be Helmet's experience in and of itself, as panic attacks appear the exact same in every mind, but I wanted to note it nonetheless, as this is a core attribute that can be experienced during a panic attack. And so, in addition to this, the Mote itself also explicitly mentions that he is experiencing an accelerated heart rate, assuming it has a heart, the inability to breathe, and later in the level, he mentions sweating and feeling like he is about to go on stage, which could also potentially include several of the other symptoms that are indicative of panic attacks, such as nausea, trembling, lightheadedness, just to name a few. And so, unsurprisingly, these fights hit panic attacks pretty well on the nose. And so after the first one concludes, Helmet screams for the universe to just shut up in order for him to give his mind a moment's peace. And so we're transported to an ethereal and hauntingly silent corner of his mind, where we see starry silhouettes of memories that are still locked away in the deepest recesses of his mind. Though you may be wondering, why can't Helmet remember anything here? Why is it simply ambiguous shapes that provide the idea that maybe there are some memories there, and why does he not know who he even is? Well, one answer could be that this is because he's still learning to reintegrate all of his senses, and that his brain is so out of sorts that it just needs to continue with the process of rebooting and reformatting itself after having gone without stimulation for so long. I think that this is a bit too simple of an explanation to be the full picture. Instead, I believe that Helmet is currently experiencing what is known as dissociative amnesia, which is characterized in the DSM as being the inability to recall important autobiographical information, usually of a traumatic or stressful nature, that is inconsistent with ordinary forgetting. Now, for an individual to have dissociative amnesia, this disturbance in memory cannot be better attributed to the effects of substances or another neurological or medical condition. And so while Helmet's brain was forcibly separated from his body and was dormant for a long time, I don't think we can say that he actually suffered any traumatic brain damage during the Battle of Grulovia or over these 20 years. And so if he has dissociative amnesia, this would explain why Helmet has completely lost all of his memories surrounding his life history, his identity, and everyone that's close to him. But as we move forward into the level, well, Helmet may not realize it, these memories are not truly gone. They're just laying dormant, as Raz in the Mote of Light begins seeing something banging on what appears to be the sky in this silent portion of Helmet's mind. And when the door inevitably opens, we are greeted by Vision Quest, one of the 5 senses in Helmet's mind that sounds and looks remarkably similar to Ford Crawler. And so, as we crawl out of a memory vault that, quite honestly, isn't doing its job very well, we are greeted with what I consider to be the epicenter of Helmet's mind, which is the stage at a Woodstock-esque festival with scores of fans in the crowd that all look remarkably like Nick from the Mailroom. And as we interact with Vision, I think it's worth noting that this is Helmet's mental representation of Ford, whom many believe to be a visionary and a leader, since he is the one who brought together the Psychic Six, who are the progenitors of Psychonauts themselves. So it makes sense that he would be represented by Vision, or the sense of sight itself. And as we progress through the level, we begin to see the world through the eyes of Vision himself, by quite literally entering his eyeball, which is strange. And then the kaleidoscope stuff happens, and we're greeted by an incredibly green world. And so moving forward, we begin to see the world through the eyes of Vision, and without a moment's hesitation, we have some sensors coming after us that we must defeat as they try to expel us out of this area of Helmet's mind. And the Mote of Light says that he forgot that it's that kind of world, likely to a nod that much of this level is inspired both conceptually and aesthetically by the hippie movement of the 1960s, in which many individuals who are a part of this movement denounced war and violence, instead leading lives of pacifism. And so as we progress through this area, we are eventually stopped by a fan that is spinning far too quickly for us to pass, and this is where we're able to learn the time bubble ability, which is described as a way to slow down one's perception of time, which reveals that the fan actually says things like time is, reality is, perception is, and illusion is, really illustrating to us Helmet's belief that our perceptions of time and reality are just illusions. It's an interesting thought that Helmet would experience time differently, considering he was quite literally just a consciousness in a jar for those long 20 years. And I think that this train of thought really mimics a lot of mindfulness practices, which are oftentimes used to help people avoid destructive or automatic habits by learning to observe their thoughts, emotions, and other present moment experiences without judging or reacting to them too viscerally. And so if the Mote of Light is anything, it's certainly introspective. And while I could walk through every twist and turn in this segment of Helmet's mind, in reality there are only two things I really want to talk about at this point, with the first being Helmet's second panic attack. Now, even more so than the first one, I think that this is a really striking depiction of a panic attack, because it was so abrupt and out of nowhere in the level, which is a great representation of how so many people have experienced panic attacks in their everyday lives. It's tough, it's hard to predict, and in this circumstance, he was just soaking in the colors when he began to feel overwhelmed. And so when Raz tried to calm him down, this just hastened the appearance of the second panic attack in the level. And then, just as quickly as it came, it goes again once Raz defeats it. So progressing through the level, we eventually reach the giant statue of Ford at the very end where we can collect the instrument. And I was really stricken by the design of, well, really all of the statues throughout the course of Helmet's mind that represent the senses, as they are highly reminiscent of the gods in the Hindu religion like Shiva or Ganesh, which makes sense because within the hippie movement of the 60s, as people began becoming more and more interested in spirituality, meditation, and yoga, this was further exacerbated by the fact that a band as popular as the Beatles went to live in India in 1968 with a guru named Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. And them being the celebrities that they were, they encouraged Americans to experiment with these neo-Hinduism ideas. And this connection is even further exacerbated by the fact that Vision is wearing a uniform that is heavily reminiscent of what the Beatles wore on the cover of their album Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, which actually had figures of both Buddha and a Hindu goddess on the cover with a multitude of famous actors, musicians, gurus, and well, there's just a lot going on with this cover. Also, as a fun little aside, when Raz actually picks up the violin, and the fact that the lightning strikes it the way it does, this is actually just a subtle reference to another of Double Fine's games, Brutal Legend, which also features Jack Black as a voice, which, I don't know, that's fun. And as we return to the stage and see Vision do a killer solo that's greeted by more anger and tomatoes from the Knicks, it's time for the crew to get into the Feelmobile, which, you know, is your standard Volkswagen bus that was oh so popular in the 60s and 70s, and they begin seeking out the remaining 4 senses. And so as we're on our journey to reunite the senses, we are able to go to either the concession stand or to the campsite. And depending on which you complete first, will alter the Mote of Light's appearance in minor ways, but it's nothing huge. So starting out with the concession stand, we go to meet Sniffles and Tasty. So as we pass by the monotony of Nick's waiting in line for the concession stand, through a series of fun platforming segments, through the trippy and vibrant festival scenery, we are able to finally meet Tasty and Sniffles once we reach the stand itself. And we can tell that they are Helmet's mental representations of Cassiopeia and Compton Bull. And I absolutely love that they paired these two together for the sheer fact that the sensation of flavor is actually a combination of both taste and smell. This is explained by the Culinary Institute of Education as happening because as you chew, you force air through your nasal passage, and these food odors or odorants are detected by receptor proteins on hair-like cilia at the tips of the sensory cells in your nose, which in turn send neural messages to the brain. And these two messages are what we would perceive as a flavor or taste. So, because Compton and Cassie are so close and work so well together in real life, it stands to reason that even as senses, they complement each other tremendously well. Now, just like with Vision, for them to be able to rejoin the band, we must first retrieve their lost instruments. And in turn, Sniffles, well, she, sniffs us into the land of noses and tongues. Psychonauts is a very weird game. And so our first task in this realm of taste is to feed the tongue gate some absolutely delicious looking candy. And if this level hits your sweet tooth like it hits mine, then you should check out this week's sponsor, Tokyo Treat and Sakurako. Tokyo Treat is a monthly Japanese subscription box full of popular Japanese candy and snacks, such as Japan-exclusive Kit Kats, Ramune, ramen, and so many more. Whereas Sakurako is a monthly Japanese subscription box full of authentic, traditional Japanese snacks straight from Japan's local artisan snack makers, and both are delivered straight from Japan to your doorstep. Essentially, both Tokyo Treat and Sakurako's goals are to share Japanese culture to the world through the medium of snacking. So if you want to enjoy pop Japanese snacks, you can choose Tokyo Treat, but if you want more of a traditional Japanese tea time, you can enjoy a nice box of Sakurako. And both boxes come with these incredible 24-page cultural guide booklets, so that if you're afraid of not knowing what snacks are in the box, these booklets will explain everything about each and every snack in there, as well as having a lot of information about Japanese culture. And as I was sifting through the box, the treats that really stood out to me from Tokyo Treat were the watermelon seed Ramune candy, which were absolutely delectable, and I have already finished the package at time of recording this, and the refreshing Chupa Chups strawberry cream soda, which I cannot recommend enough. And the Sakurako box came with so many unique and interesting snacks that I've never tried before, and I'm guessing that a lot of you haven't either. But they came with these incredibly beautiful and ornate chopsticks, and I really loved the Shikuwasa manju that just had that amazing orangey zest to it. And this Okinawa brown sugar bread was so fluffy and moist, and honestly overall refreshing. So every single box of Tokyo Treat and Sakurako has a new and unique theme, and this month's theme for Tokyo Treat is Sugoi Summer. August in Japan means the summer holiday, so this month's box is full of tasty and limited edition summer themed treats like the Chupa Chups strawberry cream soda and the watermelon seed Ramune candy that you saw me eat just a second ago, which are absolutely delicious. And this month's Sakurako theme is Okinawa Retreat, where you can enjoy Okinawa's finest summer treats. And Sakurako is partnering with the Ogimi villages in Okinawa, which is really cool because they have the highest life expectancy in the world, and they've got snacks with ingredients grown right there in the Shikuwasa manju and in the Okinawa cinnamon cookies. And all of these Sakurako snacks are perfect for pairing with their amazing tea. So if either of these boxes boxes interest you, make sure to check the description down below and use the code listed for $5 off your first Sakurako or Tokyo Treat box. So if you've ever wanted to go on an Okinawa retreat or have an absolutely amazing Sugoi summer, this is your opportunity. But let's check back in with Raz and the Mote of Light as they continue searching for the Feast of the Senses. Now, as we move through this level, it's more or less the same process as when we traveled through Visions, with Raz needing to use his time bubble to prevent himself from being squished by the vicious tongues or nose hairs in this level. And so as we move forward, we're confronted with the typical sensors that you would expect, but nothing overly notable again until the Mote of Light becomes incredibly aware of his ability to smell and in turn tastes his sweat, which sends him into another abrupt panic, with there being 2 panic attacks present this time instead of 1. But once these attacks are defeated, you can essentially go on to complete this area without much incident. Though, of course, with 4 out of 6 members of the band back together, the audience is still not having it whatsoever. And you need to get the last 2 senses in order to complete the Feast of Senses. But before we talk about those, I think we need to discuss why audio is a particularly important sense for Helmet to regain. If we are to go under the stage in this main hub of his mind, we will see several figments that depict a wedding with Bob Zanotto standing under the arches, revealing for the first time to us as the players that Helmet and Bob got married prior to the Battle of Grulovia. This is fascinating because this is not explored in any more depth apart from a couple winks and nods to it until Bob's mind fully details their wedding and their relationship. But we'll uncork that bottle in another video. The reason I bring this up is because when we go to the campground, we see several figments of Bob all throughout this area. And while these figments have shown up through the entirety of the world, this is definitely where the highest concentration of them are. If we were to look at the first of Helmet's memory vaults, that technically shouldn't be able to be reached until you have the mental projection ability from Cassie's mind, unless you sequence break the game with the pyrokinesis ability, you will see that prior to joining the Psychonauts, Helmet was actually a traveling performer who would use his psychic abilities to project images into wherever he was performing his less than famous psychodicy. And it was during a particularly empty performance, however, that he was initially recruited by Ford Cruller. Helmet was actually the final member of the original Psychic 7 to be recruited, and when he performed for the other members so that they could see what he could do, we can see Bob's face light up with delight, illustrating to us what is likely one of Helmet's first core memories of his soon-to-be husband. And so as Raz climbs up this mountainous campsite where Audio and Dr. Touch are, in the words of the Mote of Light, getting high, when we finally reach them, we enter the next area through Audie's ear hole, and we are off to the races to finish getting the band back together. In this area, I finally want to address 2 aspects of Helmet's mind that I believe are so fascinating, with the first being a mechanic that has been present throughout the entirety of Helmet's mind, which are the rainbow bridges. Now, at first glance, they may just seem like a nice aesthetic choice, and who knows, maybe they are, and I'm just reading way too deeply into things, but if we really look at it, aside from the obvious and potentially unintentional reference to Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon album cover that illustrates light refracting through a triangular prism, I've also seen people speculate that these are present as a slight nod towards Helmet's sexuality, but since they don't make up all of the colors of the rainbow, I personally feel like this is a bit of a stretch, but definitely not out of the question. Additive color theory tells us that if you add all of the colors together, you create white light. And if you break white light down, you get a rainbow, which creates the bridge. However, the interesting part is that when you walk over this bridge of light, you hear what sounds to be like musical notes. And this is likely because Helmet is experiencing a form of synesthesia known as chromesthesia, which is when an individual can see sounds or have colored hearing, which is to an extent what is happening on this bridge, with some bridges even having figments of music notes hovering above them, which I think is so incredibly clever. And as we continue forward, we end up in an arena where we need to fight our way through to get to Dr. Touch and Audio's keyboard and drum sets. And while taste and smell work together, I think it's safe to say that in this area, touch and hearing are jumbled together, which brings me to talk about auditory tactile synesthesia, aka hearing touch synesthesia, which is another rare form of synesthesia. It occurs when sounds heard by the individual produce a tactile sensation on certain areas inside and outside of the body. And so once all of the enemies in this area are dealt with Raz defeating regrets, panic attacks, and sensors, which at this point I don't think I need to explain why all of these enemies are present when we consider the fact that Helmet hasn't been able to see the love of his life for so long, and while he may not currently be able to remember who he is and who the people around him are, it's clear that there are some lingering traces of memories that are informing this mental world that likely lead to some of those regrets. And so once we clear this area, get the eardrum and Dr. Touch's keyboard, the band is finally back together, and they have what is quite possibly one of the greatest musical numbers in any video game. But as I look at them all together like this, there's something that has been absolutely gnawing at the back of my mind that I think conceptually is really, really interesting, which is why Double Fine chose the colors that they did for each of the senses. And so, not knowing the answer to this, I scoured the internet and could not find anything that didn't feel like a stretch. So I did what anyone would do. I asked my wife Allie if she had any ideas, and after some spitballing back and forth, we thought about how he essentially states in this song that the different senses fill in the gaps to make him whole again, just like the rainbow's colors could combine to create a white light which could be representative of him. And so as a visual representation of this, we turn towards the mural at the front of the mother lobe, because barring the outlier that is Helmet, it kinda makes sense that all of these characters form a rainbow, which help make Helmet who he is. But I don't know. This felt like pretty threadbare proof to go off of that this would be correct. So Allie took to the Double Fine Discord, and she just asked, and lo and behold, a developer from Double Fine actually answered, confirming that there was a meaning to the colors. We were stoked, we were ready. We thought that James had the key to unlocking nearly the last piece of this video. So Allie pressed a little bit more, sharing our theory, to which James responded, "Cool." We could tell James was playing hard to get. He knew something that we didn't, and now it was our mission to get James to fess up. However, Allie had to bow out of the conversation, saying that she'll keep thinking on it, to which James gave another cryptic response, simply saying, "No answers, only questions." Well played, James. But now I felt like it was my turn to step in, because we needed this answer. So I lightly pushed, asking if we got it right, whether or not he would confirm or deny our theories, and James was less than helpful. I then disappointedly went to get some food. This was a mistake, because as I was eating a bagel, James decided that this was the perfect moment for a 5-minute AMA, where he said he would answer anything. I didn't see this until 6 minutes after he sent the message. So my questions have been left unanswered to this day, because I was 1 minute late, because I was eating a bagel. So James, if you're seeing this, I want you to know that we have beef now. Unless you want to let me know what the colors mean, because I'm really, really curious and I would really, really appreciate it. And I would be eternally grateful if you let me know. But if you don't, we're fighting. And if anyone watching this video has any ideas, please let me know in the comment section down below, because this is living rent-free in my mind. And so after we go on this incredible psychodicy, and it's officially revealed that this Mote of Light has been Helmet all along, his nightmare of Maligula breaks free from the memory vault we were in at the beginning of the level, and Maligula begins to terrorize him, which sends him back into the dark recesses of his mind. However, with his 5 senses regained, and Raz's ability to slow down his thoughts and help him process through these lost memories, we finally learned what happened all those years ago. And so because Helmet's amnesia is dissociative and not caused by traumatic brain damage, this means that all of his memories from the past were successfully stored. And this is why it's possible for him to start remembering everything that had happened so long ago, all the way up to becoming a brain in a jar. And so as we are helping Helmet to recall his past memories, we learn all about how he tried to wake Lucy from inside Maligula using a monologue about her life. We see how hurt he was that he initially thought Ford and Otto walked away from him, leaving him for dead. And we see him realizing that he did everything to save Bob from Maligula. And so, while these are all mental constructs, with each one of them, he is able to see the good in his friends and believe the best of them, and that they would not have any ill intentions for him, even though initially he did have some doubts. And essentially, this is the exact same story that we see in the second memory vault, although the second memory vault goes a little bit further. We see the battle with Maligula, we see him dive in front of Bob, and use smelling salts once he's underwater to send his brain back to Ford, which Ford then brings with him to Green Nail Gulch, and abandons it after his mind is shattered by the astrolaith, until Otto happens upon it and puts it into the brain frame, where it would lay dormant for the next 20 years. So the last thing that we do is fight off the illusion of Maligula with help from the Feast of the Senses, and allow Helmet, the psychic Viking, to take a bow. This is probably one of the most visually striking and conceptually interesting levels I have ever experienced, and it is in no small part thanks to how magnificently the folks over at Double Fine were able to portray Helmet's character. Even though for the most part he doesn't even remember who he is, they're able to paint for us a very clear picture of a loving, wholesome man who, even though he had his fair share of anxieties, doubts, and regrets, he kept moving forward despite this. With the help of Raz, he is able to regain his memories and even his sense of self and continue forward so that he can be reunited not only with the friends he believes in so profoundly, but with the man he loves. Helmet is the perfect balance of being a fun and quirky character within the Psychonauts universe, while also maintaining an incredible amount of emotional depth and gravitas. And this is in no small part thanks to Jack Black's amazing work as his voice. I hope more than anything that this is not the last time we have the chance to see Helmet Fullbear in action, because let's be honest, the world needs someone who can deliver them a true psychodicy. But that'll do it for this week's video, guys, and I want to pass the question off to you. What are your thoughts on the Psy King Sensorium, and is there anything that I missed? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section down below, and while you're down there, why not liking the video, subscribing to the channel, and why not even ringing that notification bell so you never miss another upload. And if you're interested in Tokyo Treat Sakurako or both, make sure to check out the link in the description down below so that you can get $5 off your first purchase. And as always, I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, a fantastic rest of your week, and why not even a fantastic rest of your month. And I will see you in the next video. Later.